Welcome to the Spirit School of Ministry podcast, where we discuss discipleship in everyday life. Well, hello there. Pastor Bob here. Pastor Liz. She's doing something with her cough. I don't know what it is. She's got a cough drop in her mouth. Out. No.
Okay.
No, don't do that.
Wow.
And then we have Pastor David.
Yeah.
And unfortunately for all of you listening and watching, I'm asking the questions today. And you know how bad that can get, right? And they wouldn't let me chew gum while I was doing this.
You're welcome. You're welcome, everyone.
See, people, we care about
I don't want
you.
you falling off the chair.
We care. Oh, yeah. Can't chew and breathe at the same time. Is that what you're saying? I resemble that remark. Okay, well, let's get right here in my hot little hands. They're so hot that my Apple phone doesn't work anymore.
Oh.
Yes. Let's get to these questions.
Let's do
now,
it.
we are doing a whole series on leadership still.
We are.
Seems
This
like
is
it.
good stuff.
Is this the last one?
So far.
Could be.
Oh.
They'll
don't
know
know.
because another one won't show up.
Okay.
That's when we'll know,
It's a good
right?
indicator.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
See, everyone knows leadership is not fun and games. It's all serious stuff, right?
That's right.
Okay.
Depends on what you're leading.
Yes. Well, today,
Especially
we're
if you're the boss of the comedy store.
Yeah,
It
or
is
like
fun.
a joke
It is
shop.
fun and
joke
games.
shop.
Yeah.
We'll just do jokes all today. I like that. Actually, I'm really good with this.
Or like something with like puppies. That could be fun.
Puppies.
I want that job.
Now, Liz, get close to the microphone because people have been complaining they can't hear you. You know what I'm saying? So we want you to talk into that microphone.
Okay.
Yes.
I'll just keep my
Just like that.
face close.
Okay. Walking out leadership
Good.
is the topic we're doing today. That's for Rose. She needs that. She's back there laughing and trying to figure out where we're going. See, I do this intentionally so that they'll never ask me to do the questions again, ever. I do this when I preach. They never ask me to preach again when I'm done. It's great.
Until the next time.
This is a leadership skill I'm talking to you all about. Okay.
Okay, we're receiving your wisdom.
Yes. So, my first question for you, great brainiacs, is this. Why? Don't laugh with water in your mouth, okay, please, and a cough drop, or else we'll all be carrying stuff here. Why is it important for you to have exposure to leadership issues if you're training as a leader? Why?
What is the leadership issue?
Yes,
Leadership has lots of
the
issues.
things that issue out from leaders.
I mean, why
Or
is it
issue-
important to see leaders make mistakes?
No, not necessarily that, but that's a good question. You can answer that one if you want. But I'm asking, leaders run into things. They run into issues usually with other people in their lives and stuff. And so if you're walking out your leadership, why is it important for you to get some exposure to that, to see it actually happen? Like if someone's training you to be a leader, and they completely keep you in the dark as to the issues that could happen, what happens to you? You see what I'm saying? Go ahead, cough drop, lady.
No, I get it.
You get the question.
Ladies
My
first.
questions
Ladies
are very.
first.
Yeah.
My questions are not very deep. They're extremely wide.
Yeah, we're trying to hone in on your question here.
Yes.
Well, it is important that leaders who are training other leaders bring them in to so they are exposed to the realities of leadership. I think that's actually really critical because otherwise you can train people in the semantics of leadership, but they will never actually observe how people walk through real life issues, whether that's like real life issues with other people and delicate situations or things that are weighty, or whether that's them dealing with their own faith. I think there's a lot of issues that come up with leadership that are you have to bring people into, and you have to obviously we try to be discerning when's the right time to bring them in and all of that.
You
But
mean weigh the transparency component of it.
yeah, and just that maybe there's some situations where it's better not to expose certain people at their development to those things yet. But I think if you're just training someone academically, but don't actually bring them in to where they can observe you walking it out, and they can talk about it, and they can ask questions and learn, like, what's your thought process going through that? Why did you choose to do it this way and not that way? What about this thing? It's like it's like the kind of the working lab of the training.
That's very good. I think in a previous podcast, you mentioned something very interesting. You said that a lot of leadership is caught and not necessarily taught. So what you're explaining to me now is that process of catching leadership is actually being brought in alongside someone and seeing how they actually respond to things, how they deal with issues, what they do. Also, not just issues externally coming to them, but how they deal with their own situations, their own life. And I know that speaks a lot to what we ended the last podcast on, and that was everyone who's responsible to lead in some area. Is how will you deal with issues of your own life? It's how will you do that? And so I think that that's the question I was asking, David.
Yeah, I mean, when you encounter an actual human problem, it takes things out of the realm of theory into real life, and you start to say, this is what it actually means, for example, to counsel people when they bring you a legal issue, or when they bring you a marital issue that you had great theories before. But then when you encounter somebody's actual problem, it's far more multifaceted usually than what you thought. So it brings people out of naivete and out of like a simplistic view of leading people. And it gives them a taste of like, there's a lot of really thorny, complicated problems that you have to solve. And it takes a lot more wisdom than just, oh, here's the answer I read in a John Maxwell book, because those are all really important. But how you apply the principle takes so much experience. And that's really what I hope I've been growing in the past 10 years. I've been growing in ministry, is seeing more actual real life situations and issues with people. And the way I see things now is so much different than when I first started, because they require so much care and listening to them and not being panicked by the issue too. That's the other thing too, is like when you encounter an issue, I think it increases your resilience. And that like it keeps you from being shocked at people's problems. It keeps you from reacting with harsh judgment because you've seen it before. It's like the first time you ever grapple, if you ever wrestled or you ever did jujitsu or something like that. The first time you get taken down and someone's on you, crushing you, you completely panic. You can't breathe at all. You immediately tap out. You're like, oh. But over time, the more that you grapple, you're like, oh, okay, I'm close to a person. I'm not freaking out. I know what to do. I know the grips. I know how to get out of this situation. And that's just the example that's coming to my mind is you get pressure tested and you get that resilience to like, oh, I've handled this before. I've seen this person do this. I've seen how my leader handled that. I've seen how my pastor addressed that. I at least know who to go to for counsel on this, or I at least know who to involve in this so I can move forward and lead in this situation, where before I would have just completely freaked out and said, I have no idea what to do. You handle this, my great leader. You come in and save me. Where now I could maybe speak to some things because I've seen it. So hopefully that answered something.
I think it does, and I think the point you're bringing up, both of you, and that is that your leadership does not occur in a vacuum, and it doesn't occur in a very sterile situation, and it's not ever an academic situation. It's never those things. It really has real life situations and real life consequences, and you're affected by it. And so if you're not like Jesus he's a true leader. He was touched with the feelings of our infirmity. If you're not affected by things, I didn't say overwhelmed by them. I said you will feel them, because you're going to be with people who have things happening in their life that matter. That they're trying to care for their life. They're suffering maybe losses. They're hurting, and we those are things you can teach in a lab, right? That happens only in the laboratory of life, and how you deal with that, how you walk that out with people. That's really where leadership. That's where it meets the road. The rubber meets the road on that kind of thing. But question number 2. That was a pretty good answer you guys gave.
That was a good. I mean, it was a good question.
It was
Once
a
we
great
understood
question,
it.
Pastor
Great.
Bob.
Oh, I love when people do that. Great question. Like, what are they saying when they say that?
It means I have no idea.
I have
what
no
my
idea
answer's
what you're
going to be.
saying.
You're buying time.
You're buying time. That's what
answer
I
it.
always thought it was. Right. Or you're trying to make it so everybody forgets the question. So whatever you answer sounds smart.
Let me ask you a question.
Yes. I'm glad you asked me that question. No. Okay, second one here is good leadership defined by success at all times?
Yes.
No.
This is good team
Question number
leadership.
3.
Oh, why?
Oh man. Yeah, I think well, obviously in the sense of like just accomplishing your goals, it's not always like you could be leading well and not accomplish your goals necessarily that you set out to do. Sometimes the way forward is to go back for a few steps, go back to where something was broken, fix that. Might not initially look like a success in terms of achieving benchmarks or tasks or numbers or what you wanted to do externally. But so again, it would depend how you define success. But if it was just meeting goals, I don't think necessarily. I think sometimes you have to go back to the heart of the people you're leading and try to say like, well, what is really the heart behind what I'm doing here? And what am I actually trying to achieve? And so, I mean, in my experience, sometimes I've had to just go back to the drawing board with different groups or different ministries and say like, let's return to the heart of teaching the word and making disciples. And it might shrink down a little bit, but at least when we move forward, it's going to be going in the right direction. So it takes a little bit of like, can you withstand that initial outward appearance of failure in order to move forward towards where you actually want to succeed? Whether or not you're going to get there, at least you're trying to figure out where you want to go. So that's just a thought.
Yeah, I think you're right. It does depend. It depends greatly on how you define success. And I think that one of the things that kills leaders is they define success a certain way, like achievement or recognition or following in a public way. There's a lot of ways I think leaders can define success for themselves and really be set up for disappointment in a lot of ways. And so I think we have to, as leaders, understand that success in the Lord is obedience, and that may or may not have results that are measurable in this life. And so I think that can be one of the things that's hard for leaders, because leaders are generally like achievement oriented. They want to accomplish something, right? And so it's I believe there's always that point of coming back to my number one definition of success is, did I do what the Lord told me to do, and leave the results to Him, which is really hard when you, again, are result oriented.
So what you're saying, if I'm hearing correctly, is if a leader feels like good success for them is something achieving the things that they had planned, only, nothing else, then the pitfalls of that are pretty severe, it sounds like.
Oh,
sounds
absolutely.
like the disappointment, discouragement, all of that, because you're trying to achieve something that you've created as the gold standard, if you will.
Right. Or taking on other people's expectations of what successful leadership looks like. I mean, we always go back to Jesus, because He, as a natural leader in the world, maybe was not so successful. I mean, He led in the natural, He led a rebellion for 3 years, and then He was killed. He didn't establish the kingdom the way the Jews expected Him to, so they were very disappointed in His leadership. He wasn't super successful with all of His disciples. You know what I'm saying? Like, from a natural perspective, He didn't achieve that much.
Right. He didn't travel real far.
He didn't travel far.
He also didn't get too many.
He didn't have any social media.
No social. He didn't get booked into a lot of places either.
Yeah, I mean, just looking at His life, if you were just to look at everything that happened over the span of His life before and after, it'd be very easily, from someone watching from the outside, to say, oh, this guy was a flash in the pan that didn't amount to much. And so I think that we have to just, and obviously what He achieved spiritually was the most significant thing that has ever happened in the history of the world. But how many people have not recognized that or didn't recognize that? So I think it's something for leaders. Like when you're talking about success, how are you defining success? Because that will really set you up for either contentment and peace, or striving, or the fear of man, or I gotta look like I'm doing something that's useful.
Right.
I want my life to amount to something. All of those things that can drive people really out of the will of God into other areas that look like successful leadership, but you completely failed your assignment, actually.
So that kind of natural success sounds like a really strange taskmaster in someone's life. Like it just beats you into a place to submit to it, and maybe you can never, because there's so many variables in life that you don't have control over no matter what. Yeah. And so things can be unsuccessful, if you will, for no reason, no apparent reason. Right. And then yet they could be very successful for somebody else for no apparent reason. It just was the right time. Yeah. And so it's an interesting scenario you put out there. Yeah.
I think you'll never be able to fulfill everyone's expectations of you. You never, you never will. People want their leaders to have the right answers, be friendly, have time for them, be in prayer, hours a day. They want them to be a good speaker. They want them to be financially, knowledgeable. There's so many things people have expectations of. You will never be able to fulfill so everyone's expectations of a successful leader.
Isn't that the truth? I can barely fulfill one of my own expectations, let alone everybody else.
In terms of the outward success, Ecclesiastes talks about it, where it says, as for us, like the race is not to the swift or the fight to the strong, but time and chance happen to them all.
Yeah.
And like, have we actually internalized that sometimes the Lord blesses things that are, I just heard Jeremiah Johnson say, like, he'll bless an Ishmael. It's something of the flesh, right? And so just because there's things that are being outwardly blessed, it doesn't necessarily mean the undertaking is from God. I was thinking when you were talking about Gamaliel in Acts 4 and 5 in the Jerusalem Council, he's a Pharisee, and he goes, Theudas rose up and said he was the Christ, and then he died, and all his followers went away. And then this guy stood up and said he was the Christ, and all his followers went away. So let's just basically look at this. If this undertaking of the apostles is from God, we're not going to be able to hinder it. But if it's from man, it will fail.
Right.
And so like God's view of success is a long-term success. It's fruit that abides. And in the immediate, like Liz said, really it was in the immediate sense, a failure of Jesus's movement. But if you fast forward 300 years, the whole Roman Empire was Christianized. So that bore fruit long term. And that takes a lot of faith to say, like, if I walk by faith, even if I affect one person, even if I make 2 disciples, that ripple effect has enduring fruit. And it's looking at it God's way instead of looking at it from the world where it's just time and chance. I hope it worked out. I hope it was, the right time for the product, whatever, it hit the shelves at the perfect moment.
Right.
That's what you have to depend on if you're not depending on the providence of God.
That's very good. Well, this is really appropriate. Like I said, we're talking about walking out leadership and how you do it in every aspect of your life. And some people are called very specific areas of leadership, and some, like I said earlier, just your life. And that is a pretty important component of that, because you could you have an assignment to make disciples. You could be making a disciple that's going to affect millions and millions of people. You don't know, actually. Right. Or you could be affecting somebody who's going to affect somebody. Right. You might never, how many of the, if we look at success, like you were saying, in Jesus' life didn't look very successful. The apostles, they didn't look like they had a lot of success. If you look at their lives, every single one of them, maybe except for John, being martyred, it's like, that was not successful. That didn't look so great. And then what about the, prophets and people in the Old Testament? They, hey, the people around them probably like, well, that guy wasn't a prophet. None of his stuff came to pass.
They did not receive what was promised.
Right. It's amazing, isn't it? Well, here's another question for you. We'll see how this goes. Is it essential to any mission or calling to have a focused strategy? And we're talking about a leader. When you're a leader, is it essential to have a focused strategy?
Yes.
I'm going to ask a lot. I'm going to ask a lot of questions. Or is it actually the leader's job to do that? Is that one of the jobs of a leader? And if you're leading in your own life, is that a pretty important job, essential job to have a focused strategy?
Yeah.
Yeah. You want to define where you're going.
You think?
So if you don't have a vision, you should try to get one.
Will somebody else define it for you if you don't?
Satan.
Oh, not him. Yes.
Yeah, probably. I mean, you could, if you just are passive, you're not like, you're really not setting any sort of a tone or moving forward in any way. And, yeah, absolutely. You have to.
When you said that, I
have
just thought of a
statement.
pinball just going boing, boing.
Yeah.
Boing,
I mean, we have like mission statements. We have, statements of intent. We have goals, things that hopefully the Lord has shown you, because unless the Lord builds the house, you're laboring in vain, right? And so articulating that and explaining why you're doing the things you're doing is probably the number one role of a leader, to try to get people on the same train as you. So that would just be my first stab at it.
Yeah. I really don't like mission statements, but that's just me, just personally. But I realize that they have some importance, or some, they have some importance at times. But I believe individuals need to have focus and goals and strategies for those things in their soul. But a good leader, I think, actually knows how to temper that, realizing that you have to change sometimes with things.
Right.
You can't be so stuck on your little strategy and your little, goal and your little mission statement that you don't change.
Yeah. Yeah. I believe the Lord gives strategy and he gives direction. And I was thinking about Joseph, it's like the Lord gave him understanding, but also the way to deal with the problem that was coming. And so it's not just enough just to see what can be or what will be. You have to also decide how you're going to face it and how you're going to address it and how you're going to prepare for it. And so I think those are all parts of mission and strategy. I think the mission, that's the vision of where you want to go, but how are you going to get there? It's pretty important to lay out for people, and knowing that you can adjust it, but you have to be walking to be adjusted. It's like there's a correction that can come. The Lord will direct your path; He'll direct your steps, but you have to be walking in order for Him to do that. So I think sometimes it's the leader is the one to say, we're gonna go that way. And as we're going, we're open to the Lord can change it and He can move us, and but we're going to start walking.
Yeah.
So you mentioned that about a leader. So my follow-up question is it a leader's responsibility to communicate that to people, to strategies and all those kinds of things?
Absolutely. I think that's one of the biggest parts of leadership.
So you're suggesting don't leave everybody in the dark. Biblically, is that true, David?
To communicate a strategy,
yes,
write the vision and make it plain that the people may run that hear it.
Yes.
It is
job.
biblical. So
That I think is one of the key pieces of leadership, is that you keep it before people's eyes and they're in their ears constantly. Because people forget, it's like that's one of the things the leader has to do, is responsible for, I believe, is to keep rehearsing it to them. Like, this is where we're going. Yeah. This is why we're doing it. This is how we're doing it. We're doing it together. Like, you're just like, it's constant. You're just like constantly rehearsing this to them, saying it over and over. I know I'm moving my hands a lot.
Yeah. You are.
But it is that constantly. But I think that is one of the most effective roles of a leader that people can miss. So is it like, well, I said it. And it's like, well, that's great. You said it once.
Right.
And maybe for you it's solidified, but people need to constantly be hearing, this is where we're going. This is why. This is how we're going to get there.
Yeah,
they need that.
And you said it, and did they hear it? Could they repeat it back to you? Did you communicate clearly?
Also, did they receive it? Because, people, I think some of the ways we're designed is that we need reassurance at times. Yeah. Like everyone does. And it's not, It's not a show. It's not a sign of weakness or insecurities or any of those things. I think it would be like God telling you He loves you once, and never saying another word, never telling you where you're on the road, never telling you where He's still leading you and guiding you, because His guidance is a continuous thing. It's not a one time. I hope that all works out for you.
Right. I think one of the things too is that of effective leadership and communicating is that then people begin to rehearse it. They begin to say it. They pick it up for themselves. It's not just like, oh well, my pastor says this thing. It's like they've heard it and they've received it and they've bought it and they've picked it up, and now they're saying it and they're rehearsing it to each other. I think that's a really great mark of effective leadership.
Very good. Do you, this is an interesting question I'm going to give you. I'm just make this one up kind of on the fly, but do you believe that like having flexibility, flexible tactics and in the moment decision making and all those kinds of things, are those critical to being a leader?
Yeah. I will decisively answer that question.
Decisively answer that.
Yes. You
Why?
need to be able to.
Why is that, David?
Because not everything can be planned out, and no plan survives first contact with the enemy. So, how are you going to be able to respond? Are you going to get frozen in fear? Or are you going to say, "Oh, I'm so afraid to make a mistake. I can't adapt." And of course, you need to have your worldview solidified and your approach solidified before you even get out of bed in the morning. But once you're up, you're going to be facing things all the time, and you still have to steer the car, like Liz was saying, like you're going somewhere. So that requires sometimes someone cuts you off in traffic. You better be ready to slam on the brakes and give them the finger. I'm just because you're a Christian, but you got
the thumbs up.
The thumbs up.
Yeah, but see, you can make a mistake every once in a while. But at least you made a decision.
At least you made it. It was a wrong decision, but you made a decision. All right, well, Liz, is in the moment stuff really important for you and your leadership? Like to be able to be in the moment with things, not give people, the bird.
Oh my God. I think it depends. There's some things like I'm thinking about like leading worship, right? Yeah, I need to be in the moment and very flexible to see kind of what's happening, where we need to go. I'm like assessing, what's happening in the room, what the Lord is saying, how am I going to lead to get from here to here. So I think that's like very fluid. I think there are other situations though that there's pressure to make decisions on the spot where you really shouldn't. And like your decision should be, I'm not going to make this choice right now. I feel like on the spot decision making is not as big a part of leadership maybe as people think.
Do you think that some leaders actually they're like kind of proud about, I just do it in the moment. I just hear every time from Holy Spirit right then, and I don't have to think about it ever.
Yes.
I don't have to, I'm just like a free spirit just floating through.
Yes, and I don't need structure because I follow Holy Spirit.
Yes.
Meanwhile, everyone that's trying to work with them is like, can you please give us something? We don't know where you're going. We don't even know where we're starting. We don't know what's happening. And that's the thing. Like, you're just going to operate as yourself and with no one else. Maybe you can just be a free floater. But if you're trying to do anything with other people, always being spur of the moment is like torture for everyone else. And I think really inconsiderate.
Yeah. Well, this is, like I said, we're talking about here through all of this is walking out leadership, is how that actually looks. And so everybody, a lot of times people will just idolize someone, although they're just instant in season. They know exactly what to do every time, right in the moment. That it can be a little weird. It can be a lot weird following somebody like that, because there's going to come a time when they aren't going to be in the moment.
Yeah. I think though that's an area where leaders get criticized, but a lot of times you're doing what you have to do of like filling a gap. Like if somebody falls out in like a big event or a big production, just thinking of like youth camps, like sometimes people don't necessarily, you have a student leader or you have someone that doesn't necessarily, you're trying to see if they'll step into something and it doesn't work out. And then you just go in and do it, or you assign someone else to do it. And, people can criticize those things because, that wasn't the plan and this and that, but it had to get done, So sometimes you have to just be like, dang, we just got to do this thing. I got to step in and intervene sometimes. And yeah, like I totally agree. Like you shouldn't be like making important, direction setting decisions at the spur of a moment. But I was thinking more in terms of like filling a gap of something that arises.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
That was more like where you have to really be, okay, let's do it.
Absolutely.
I might get criticized for this, but I gotta take the shot,
Yeah.
And I don't always do that very well, but
Nobody does completely.
Yeah.
Well, so like I said, in the line of walking out our leadership, is for you personally, in your leadership, was being equipped and authorized to make decisions. How important was that to you? And how important is that to you today? Oh, you're laughing. I'll just go to Pastor David because we'll give her a little time to come down from her giggling. And
yeah, I don't know. Like, I don't know if I've been equipped or authorized to make unilateral decisions ever. Like, I don't know if it's ever been like, David, you have full choice of what you're going to do here on your own. And I don't even think that would necessarily be a good thing, right? Like you're operating under covering, you're operating as part of a team. You got to share what you're doing with other people. But yeah, I mean, to be put in a position where you are kind of setting the strategy and saying, hey, I have this idea, I want to go after it. That's super important to know that somebody thinks that you are suited to do that. And it doesn't mean that you're going to always do it without ever being questioned or without ever sharing it with anybody else. And so I think that was something it took me a while in my ego to get used to that of like, okay, it's not just your thing. Like you need to bring other people in on it, and other people need to have input, and other people need to check you on it on some things. And, man, it's like, oh, I wish I could just make all the decisions. I wish I could just be authorized to do everything. But at the same moment, you're going to lose out on so much wisdom, so much experience, and you might be over hasty. Like, so you need people to sort of, again, help you steer. So, but if you aren't actually said like, hey, David's in charge of this, like, or he's the teacher or he's this, well, it's like, well, who knows then who's supposed to even set the tone for what's being done, what's being taught, what's being imparted. There has to be that. There has to be somebody who's in a position of leadership that trusts somebody else, or else it's just one person doing everything. Right.
And I think that whole, equipping and authorization always falls within the scope of boundaries. I don't think anybody is outside of any of all boundaries or should be. I think there may be leaders who operate like that. I think it's very dangerous for them to operate that way. The other thing too is if you're the final say all to yourself, then when things go well, you get all the glory. When things don't go well, you're holding the bag all by yourself. But as opposed to, and we've talked about this in the past, when you're with the team or when you're under authority or when you're under counsel, and I don't even know if under is the right word, you're with counsel and things don't work out, you still have somebody walking with you. It's not like, hey, that was your idea. It's like, great. Just like, oh, I guess that failed miserably. You're going to be stuck bearing the entire weight and burden, and the buck stops there. Yeah, okay, that's nice, except that really if you're part of a team, then you know that you're together.
Yeah.
That's bone of your bone, flesh of your flesh. You have people bearing with you, and you're not just all alone out there doing it. But Pastor Liz, did you want to answer this question? Have you come back to?
I don't know. I just made me laugh. I just had so many thoughts going on in my mind.
Throw out most of those and give us a good one.
Okay. No, I was just thinking that the equipping is important and wonderful. And if you have people that are equipping you, that's like invaluable. I think the equipping that the Lord does by the trying and testing and shaping of your character is the most important, and only He can do that. So I think that sometimes people want well, I need someone to teach me. And it's like, that's good, and we should find those places. But I think the equipping of like the Lord building into you the ability to persevere under hardship, and the ability to keep walking when everything you feel tells you to quit. I don't know, that part of equipping, I think we really want to bypass and like just like, oh yeah, I know that part, but that's like the most essential things are the things that God will equip you with through challenge and testing and stretching and breaking and all of that stuff that we don't like to talk about. I think that's the most important equipping you will ever receive, because it won't fail when he does it that way. As far as authorizing, I personally don't want to be operating in any area that I'm not authorized to operate in.
Oh, that's a pretty important statement you just made.
Yeah, and I believe
you explain that?
I anything that I'm doing, I want to know that I have been intentionally been issued authority and the ability and the responsibility and the all of the things that come from issuing authority, because godly authority, everything that comes from it, is not just like, I authorize you to do this, I gave you permission. It's not just permission,
right?
But there's also, God gives you grace, the grace to do it, the competency to do it, the influence to do it, all of the things that come with godly authority. And so I don't want to be doing anything that I have not received authority to do, because then I'm all on my own. And
that's very good.
I think that's just like, that's actually one of the things for me that I'm like, I don't want to be stepping into something. I don't want to push for something if I'm not actually going to be authorized to do it.
So I think a lot of people, when they hear that word, authority, they take it in one direction. But in reality, I believe when you're talking authority, you're also talking about a covering.
Yeah.
You're talking about, in God, there's a covering. When he authorizes you to do something, he's your covering to do it. And people, I think they substitute this other idea of authority as like, no, I'm outside of covering now. I can do what I want.
Yeah. Which means you're also outside of anointing.
Yes.
And that's the part where like, I don't want to be doing something that the anointing isn't on it, because that's like, for me, that's like, I know that now I've entered into like a death walk, because now it's all dependent on me and me pulling from my flesh and my abilities, rather than being able to pull on the anointing to accomplish things that are impossible. Because without the anointing, you can't accomplish it. So that's how I view authority. That's why I'm like, I don't want to be doing something I haven't been authorized, because that's the anointing flows that way, and the ability to actually do it well and to do it in a life-giving way only comes through the issuing of authority.
So good. I like that a lot. We are talking about, walking out leadership. And so one of the things, and this is kind of a general statement question that we want to talk about, is trust essential in leadership? And, what does trust look like in leadership? Is it just in one direction, or is it trusting people around you? Is it you being trustworthy? What does it look like in leadership to you? Oh, they're all laughing again. I give you these hard questions.
I want to be slow to speak, but then it's like, it's my turn to talk. So I'll try to do the best
let's
I
put
can.
it on Liz to talk.
I've already been pretty honest about my feelings so far, so I'll just say, trusting God is the main thing. So for me, leading and following, the trust has to be in God, because if you trust people will fail. How do I know? I have failed people. Okay, you will fail people, right? And you'll do dumb stuff, and but you have to trust. And I like to add the syllable "en," like entrust, and you have to entrust yourself to God and to people. And whenever you lead people, hopefully you're being real with them and you're being transparent, and so you're entrusting yourself to them. You're entrusting even like your feelings, and you're not doing well that day. Hopefully you would entrust that to them without, being too gnarly about it. But at the same point, they have to entrust themselves to you. And so if you're not willing to entrust yourself to God and to them, how are they going to trust you? And in terms of being called on to be a leader or be in a place of authority, I would love to be trusted with that. I'm sure people, I think you can give people a responsibility without actually trusting them. You could be like, well, let's see how they do. Let me watch over them. And really you're managing them, like you're micromanaging them. And this happens in ministry just like it happens in the business world, and it happens in families. And you're not really entrusting them with any responsibility. You are going to swoop in if you see the slightest thing go wrong. You're going to check every single thing that they're doing before you see the outcome. Right. And so I think that's two different philosophies of leadership. Is it like, Are you entrusting someone, authorizing them, validating them, like we've been talking about, or are you going to manage them, micromanage? Because I know there's an element where managing is important. You got to have deadlines. I'm not like trying to be totally, deaf to that, because it's important. And I can grow in that area a lot, managing people. I'm not very good at it. Okay. But that's because I so love the idea of trusting people and putting them in that position. Because I love to be trusted. Doing the things I'm called to do, like I'm going to go after that 100% with passion, do the best I can, bring other people in on it. I might fail, but I'm going to go after it 100%. So I like when people trust me with things. Now I know people are growing into that. So I know I'm giving a long answer here, but I think it's an important thing to meditate on and explore of trusting people because you trust God. Like if you're like, hey, I want to put this person here because I believe this is how God wants me to lead. I can't control all the results. I can't control the mistakes. I also can't control the fruit that comes from it. It could be even greater than I could possibly imagine.
Right.
If I trust God with it. If I commit it to prayer. If I don't just chuck it on the person, but I walk with them, I pray for them, but then I let them operate. I validate them, right? I love to be led that way and be trusted with things. And so I hope I'm leading in a way that lets people know, hey, I'm here with you, but this is your thing. I'm going to see how you do on this. Let's see it come forth, right?
Yeah.
What do you think, Pastor Bob?
What do I think about trust? I absolutely believe it's the most essential thing in leadership. I think if you don't have that component in leadership, both for people and for you, that all leadership breaks down because you start to question everything about everybody. And so no one's leading. Everybody's like, everybody's like, well, no, I don't think that's right. Well, that wasn't right. No, this is, and so there's no purpose. There's no focus. There's no goal. Everything is people second guessing everybody about everything. Now, like David, I don't believe that it's done willy-nilly, just throw somebody, hey, guy just walked in. All right. Well, I don't know who he is. He just did time in prison for, some bad thing. Let's put him in charge of something. No.
Let him teach the youth group about deep propitiation doctrines.
Yes. So there's a training, obviously. There's a testing time. I'm not saying we throw all that out. That's all great. But at some point in time, just like Jesus did, it's going to be, this baby's yours. I'm going to send a helper. He's going to help guide you some. And if you'll listen to him, I can't even guarantee he'll listen to you. You'll listen to him. I can't even guarantee you'll receive him. But I'm sending him. I'm providing it all. And but then guess what? It's yours. Now you get to do what you get to do. And now I don't see that as abandoning. Some people might, when people want to manage every single thing about everybody's life, then, like David said, micromanage. That's what that is. In I think the actual definition of that is that you're doing everything for everybody, and so nobody gets to make it. To me, when you do that at that degree, you actually totally telling that person you are not trusted.
You kill their initiative.
Right. Why would they? Just do. You might as well go, and then you'll hear leaders, speaking of walking out leadership, you'll hear leaders go, it's just easier for me to do it myself. It's like, okay, go ahead, because then your leadership gets limited immediately because you will have to focus on something that God may have not sent you to be focused on and assigned to you. And you've assumed because you don't trust somebody else and how they're going to do it, and they're going to do it. They're not going to do exactly like me. That you better get used to. Yeah. That is part of trust, actually. And they're not going to be you. They can't be, and so you have to deal with that. And that's how walking out leadership that we're talking about here. That's the nitty gritty of how it works and the give and take. And guess what? Sometimes there's success. Sometimes there's horrible failure, things crashing and burning, and you have to deal with that. That's called life. Christianity is, like we've talked in the past, it's risk taking. It's not being, just crazy with everybody's life and not caring and, that, but there's some risk involved.
Totally.
So what do you think? I like the way you didn't answer that question. That's good. I'll go on to the next question so you don't have to answer that. Hey, that's good leadership skill there. I was really walking out leadership. Yeah. Well, this one I can't. Who's responsible to teach trustworthiness to a leader?
Holy Spirit.
That was a trick question. No, it's not the Holy Spirit. Trick question, Liz. Who is it?
Who is responsible to teach it
To
a
teach
leader?
trustworthiness to a leader. Oh, this is a trick question.
I'm not
so
totally sure
tough.
because I never.
You don't
totally
like this
sure
one.
Do
what
you have
you
an
mean.
answer in mind on this already?
I probably have an answer in mind, but
I
I'd like to
think
know what you guys think.
That person has to allow it to be developed in them. I think that
That's good.
other leaders do have a responsibility to demonstrate trustworthiness and to teach it. But I think that there are trustworthiness it's really about the heart. I was thinking about that when we were talking about it earlier. Like trust really doesn't have that much to do with like, I think this person's gonna do the schedule really well, or they're gonna like. I mean,
Right.
there is some of that, but it's really like what am I trying to say? It's not the belief that someone's not gonna make a mistake, right? Trust is really has to do with your belief about their motives for why they're doing what they're doing.
Ooh, that's good.
I think that's like the key. Like when your trust fails in someone is because you don't trust their character. You don't trust their heart, their motive for what they're doing. It's not because they made a mistake. It's because now there's something about who they are that you feel is flawed. I don't, you know what I'm saying?
Right.
So I think that like,
So you mean to tell me like teaching trustworthiness to a person doesn't strictly involve telling them everything they did wrong, pointing
Right.
out every single thing they messed up or made a mistake on.
Yeah.
You might have to do some of that.
well, because trust is so relational. It's like trying to teach relationship to people.
Yes.
It's like there are some things you can teach, but so much of it is it's developed and it's really kind of wrestled out in your own heart and between you and other people, and how much you're, like David saying, you're willing to trust the Lord to fill the gaps in between where you are and where they are, and trust that He's put people in the positions that they're in, and that He knows their heart and He knows your heart. There's so much involved in trust.
Exactly. And this is why
I got the right
I'm going to
answer.
give you I'm
Okay.
going to tell you the right answer.
Okay,
No.
good. Teach us.
Teach us, oh great wise one. My answer to this would be everybody is responsible to teach trustworthiness to leaders. Everybody. People who are their leaders, people who are their peers, people who are their subordinates. Everyone is required, because you're bringing to them, like you say, life, and going, hey, you weren't trustworthy in that one area. You said this, but you didn't. Now, you're not the judge. You don't get to execute judgment on that person, but you're the teaching aspect of it to a leader is you're pointing it out to them like, hey, that was on you.
Yeah.
And I think if you don't get that input from people as a leader, you will mess up on trustworthiness. It won't be developed. That character won't be developed in you.
Yeah. I think the interesting thing is that in order to develop trustworthiness in someone, you have to extend trust to them before they've earned it.
Oh yeah.
That's a big, like, I think that we have this, like, the world, like, well, trust is earned. It's actually not. I mean, it is in some ways, but initially you have to extend trust to someone before they've earned it.
They
And
can't earn it without it.
They can't.
Right.
You have to give it to them first, and then you can begin to develop trustworthiness in somebody. But you have to be the one to take the risk first. I think that is the only way to actually develop trustworthiness in someone.
It's like giving a tip before the waiter waits on you.
Yeah.
Which I thought, I had read this a long time ago, probably totally wrong, but they said that tips, what it stood for was to ensure proper service, and it was given ahead of time. And so you give them the money, and then they take care of it.
Yeah.
But unless you extend that to them, they have no way of proving
Right.
what their character is.
Right.
Because your character only gets proved in life.
Yeah.
It doesn't get proved with just how you talk or the things you present to people or how smart you are. Character's not proven there. It never has been.
Yeah.
Boy.
Well, I think this speaks to, you asked a question in one of our other ones about like, what if someone doesn't see someone that's, that they feel could take over? It's like sometimes the only way is actually you may not see anybody that's qualified in front of you, and you have to take all of these unqualified people and extend trust to them and see what they will develop into.
Yeah.
And I think that if we're trying to withhold trust until we see trustworthiness, we have it backwards. It actually is up to us to extend it first in order to see it in them.
Yeah.
It's so good. I have all these other weird questions for you guys, but we're not going to go over those because I think you're ending on a really good note, actually, because I think that is a big component of leadership. It's really bringing people into a place where you give them the opportunity to be trustworthy. I mean, and Jesus did that for his disciples. He's done that for us. There's no guarantees in that. And so with that, I think we can end this thing. We can land this guy right here. Well, I hope that you found something in this that was worth listening to. I'm going to guess some of the jokes at the beginning were really worth it. Those by themselves, you can just replay those bad boys over and over again. You know what I'm saying? But hey, God bless you in your leadership and what you're doing. And I pray that God will work in you, really solidify in you a character that is so trustworthy that people around you, that you become a magnet. You become people want to emulate you or Christ in you. So with that, God bless you, and we'll see you next time. Thank you for joining us. Be sure to subscribe to get the latest episode. And for more information, go to spiritschoolofministry.com.